It's day 5 of the World Chess Olympiad in Budapest. And who is going to stop India? This is such an incredibly strong team who've managed to win his first 4 matches so far in very impressive style. And that's not a big surprise in itself. What else can you expect? With 4 young guys rated over 2700, 3 of them are ranked in the top 10 of the world. And on board 1, you have the man of the year, Gukesh, who managed to win the FIDE candidates in Toronto earlier this year and therefore qualifying for the World Championship match against Ding Liren, which is taking place in Singapore in November. But Gukesh, he is just climbing up the ladder, marching in closer to 2800. I think he is rated 2775, something like this now. And he is playing in round 5 against Suleymanli from Azerbaijan. And that's not a bad country at all. This is a very strong team, but they are not as strong as they used to be a few years ago. But it's a very interesting match as Suleymanli is only 1 year older than Gukesh. They have played quite a number of games against each other, but a lot of online and shorter time control games. But the 2 classical games they have played before, and these 2 games Gukesh was also playing with the white pieces. The first one he won, but the last one they played was last year in the Isle of Man tournament, and there Suleymanli managed to win with the black pieces. So let's see what's gonna happen in this game between these 2 teenagers. I'm very excited to show you what happened in that game. If you want to see many more exciting games from this Olympiad, make sure to hit the subscribe button. Give this video a like and also help the support to grow the channel by make a PayPal donation. We'll really appreciate all the support. And then it's my turn to show you what happened, how Gukesh opens here with 1 e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4. Once again, the Italian opening, as we have seen so many times already, knight f6, d3, bishop c5. And here, Gukesh goes for bishop g5. That's quite a sharp line, trying to put pressure on this knight. But black, no-nonsense approach here by challenging the bishop with the move h6. And therefore the bishop goes back to h4. Black unpins here with the move g5. Bishop goes to g3, so you're attacking the pawn on e5, d6, c3. Maybe white is intending to expand with a move like b4 or maybe d4 at the right moment. But black played here the move a5, knight bd2, and the bishop goes back to a7. And here, interesting moment, as we have seen this pawn coming to a5 in many popular lines within this opening variation. But very often, white's pawn is also on a4. In this case, the pawn is still on a2, and Gukesh decides here to play the move a3. So I guess that white's plan is to play the move b4 to grab some space on the queen side. So this is kind of a new position, at least for me. Apparently, there have been played a number of games also from this exact position. In the majority of games, they follow the move queen e7, which is kind of a useful waiting move and probably just a clearly better idea than the move played by Suleymanli, as he went here for the move knight h5. And now knight h5 is a very thematical idea in a lot of positions, as well, you may have ideas to take the bishop anytime soon. Sometimes you can also come with your knight to f4. So definitely this bishop on g3 doesn't look particularly happy. But one of the main drawbacks of black's approach is the following move. Knight takes e5, knight sacrifice. Or is it just winning a pawn? Let's try to figure out what's going on. Because by moving the knight away from f3, white is opening up the path for the queen to hit that knight on h5. Now the critical line, one of the critical lines here, there are many options. But before we go to the game's continuation, knight takes e5. In that case, you should not take the knight on h5 because of bishop to g4 and the queen is trapped. Remember that trick. It's a very common idea in this opening. So instead, what white should do in that case is first eliminate the knight on e5. And if you do take back, then there is queen takes h5. And now there's no knight on e5 to support the bishop coming into g4. Well, anyway, that would have won a pawn, just a pure pawn for white. And therefore black has a different idea. Look at this. There's this Zwischenzug, intermediate move. Knight takes g3. So that if you do take back, then black captures on e5. That will be game over. But it's bishop takes f7. Counter Zwischenzug with check. You capture the pawn. King got a move. And look at this. Knight g6, moving the knight away. Giving check. And I think this is a very fascinating moment in the game. Because here, if I would be playing here with black, I would automatically capture here with a king on f7. So that after knight takes h8, queen takes h8. Well, how to evaluate this position? How is white gonna take back? Probably with the h-pawn. It's a very complicated position. Things are far from clear. It is positioned with two bishops against the rook, but there are hardly any open files. The king is relatively safe. If you do instead, for instance, capture with the f-pawn, probably the king can go to e7, and well, this bishop is still quite nice. The other bishop can come into the game. It's absolutely unclear. But let's go back, because black didn't play king takes bishop. Instead went here for the move king g7. And probably I would not have even considered this move, but it's actually quite interesting. First of all, taking the rook on h8 doesn't come with check. That's one of the differences that would enable black to take on h1. Everything is hanging here, so this looks really good for black. That's why instead of knight takes h8, white should consider something else. But what happens now if you just take the knight on g3? Well, I was thinking that Suleymanli's idea was to move the rook to h7, so that white doesn't get a chance to take the rook. The bishop is hanging. If the bishop moves, then you can take the knight. And well, it's total mess, absolutely unclear. This may be good for black, but it didn't happen because white instead decided to take the knight on g3 with the f-pawn. And that is a big difference. In fact, now material is even. White is in fact 2 pawns up. But the same idea here with rook h7 trying to win the minor piece will be countered now by a rook f1. And here white will be a full piece, a full 2 pawns up with a really good position. So that is not gonna help black at all. Instead, after taking the knight on g3, king takes f7 was played. So that's kind of strange. Yeah, you first go to g7 and then you take on f7 anyway. So kind of a mysterious plan by black. Knight takes h8 forced, queen takes. And here again, you have this same position we have seen already before. But because black has spent 2 moves capturing the bishop on f7, it's white's turn here in this position. And white plays a very important move, d4. So the idea is that the bishop on a7 is boxed in. It is out of play, and white also has very important ideas to get a rook into the game. Look at this. King g7 was played, getting out of the f-file, castling king side. Look at the rook. It's beautifully placed on the f-file, and we'll look for possibilities to infiltrate with the support of the other 2 pieces. But that's what is on white's mind now. Bishop d7, king h1, getting out of this diagonal. Not really sure it was needed, but looks pretty good. How should black coordinate his forces? That is a big question. I'm not sure. I don't like that bishop on a7, so I have the feeling that black is having already quite a difficult time here. If I were black, probably I would consider something like rook e8 with the idea to put a rook on e7 and guard the king along the 7th rank. In the game though, there followed rook f8. And that basically initiates the exchange of 1 pair of rooks. So white goes queen e2, rook takes f1, rook takes f1. And here now white's rook can easily try to infiltrate here without being contested by a black rook. Queen e8. The queen is coming back into the game, was of course offside on h8. Looks like the queen is helping quite well, but queen f3, threatening to enter on f6, so therefore queen e7. And okay, if black does get a chance here to consolidate, things are not looking too bad. But then, okay, you gotta find a plan to get the bishop back into the game. And that's gonna be very difficult. White continues with knight c4. That's a very important move because the knight on d2 was white's worst piece. Now it's coming to a much better square. Bishop e6. Tricky move, attacking the knight. And you would expect here a move like d5 with a double attack. Was not played by Gukesh. He's very alert here as it runs into the move bishop g8. So you maintain this pin on the knight. Therefore taking on c6 is not very attractive. And anyway, the knight can come to e5 very soon. The diagonal for the bishop is open. So you shouldn't get tempted advancing your d-pawn. That's not a good move. It doesn't win material. Knight e3 is a nice classy move. Now d5 is a serious threat, winning a piece because the knight on c4 will never be hanging anymore. Knight e8, anticipating that push of d4, d5. The knight comes into f5 with a knight fork. Black is forced to take with the bishop. And how do you take back? Very instructive moment, as a lot of people would probably just take with the queen, keeping a very nice center. But Gukesh takes with a pawn, and I really like this move. First of all, he creates the huge threat of winning the queen with a double attack with a pawn. So therefore black basically has to block that pawn with the queen. But now the rook goes to the open file. The rook is fantastically placed here. Bishop to b6 was played, intending to get the bishop probably back into the game after moving a pawn to c6 and maybe d5 at the right moment. Here g4 is played to support the pawn, so now the queen is free to move again. And well, I think black should make some sort of a waiting move like c6 and try to consolidate the position with d5, maybe bishop c7. I think the position is still very bad and white has plans of improving the queen maybe to the open file, maybe to the queen side. Also the knight on d8 is pretty bad because, well, in the game there followed another move. Suleymanli played more aggressively with the move c5, but now d5. And the bishop is out of play. And one of the big problems here is the knight on d8 is also quite bad. So if you ever go knight f7, the rook comes in to e6, hitting the queen. If queen goes away, then you play f6, the queen comes into f5. And this is not something black is not going to survive much longer. So first, you can't really move the knight from d8. Black instead played the move c4 to open up the diagonal, getting the bishop back to life again. But here it's rook e4. Rook is attacking the pawn, but bishop to c5. Interesting idea. So white can take the pawn on c4 here, which was not played by Gukesh, and for a good reason, as it does allow the move knight f7. As the knight can come into e5, it's not even about a knight fork, it's about dominating the rook, so that the rook will not be able to enter black's position. So instead of capturing the pawn, as black is preparing here to go for the move b5 and protect the pawn, white plays a4. Fantastic move. The pawn on c4 is really weak. Bishop a7 was played here. Still that pawn can be taken, of course, but I think this move queen e2 is much more attractive, as you can try to capture the pawn with the queen as well, so that the rook stays on the e file. And if the knight moves to f7, once again there's always rook e6. Well, anyway, queen takes c4 is coming, and then the queen can also come to c7. Looks pretty bad. h5 played. And I guess the point is to, if you do take on h5, well then f5 will become more vulnerable. But anyway, first a check on e7, the rook comes in. Once again, if you go knight f7, rook e6, I've mentioned it earlier. Therefore, Suleymanli played king f8, rook e8 check, king f7. And now g takes h5. This is the big difference with the rook already on e8. The pawn on f5 is poisoned as it runs into queen e7 with checkmate. Also the pawn on h5 is very important. So black cannot take the pawn yet. g4 was played, and now of course the queen is not going to take on g4 as it hangs the rook on e8. Instead, h6, very good move. If you do take that pawn, you deflect the queen from covering the e7 square. So that will be made again. This time the pawn on f5 is actually taken. because if you give a check now, the king can still go to g6. That's a big difference. But after queen takes f5, rather than giving a check on e7, h7 was played. That's a very simple and good move, as if you do take that pawn, there is a rook e7, you're winning the queen, and probably there will be some mate there along the way as well. So black tried here one more check, queen b1, but you can simply block with your queen so that the king is safe again on h1. And after queen takes e1, rook takes e1, well, the h-pawn is about to promote and black can't do much against it. So that's why Suleymanli resigned here at this point. For instance, if you go king g7, there's more than one way to convert. But in my opinion, the simplest one is to push the pawn, promote it to a queen. If you take the queen, it's rook e8 with a double attack, check, king got a move, and then you take the knight on d8, white is up, an exchange, and the pawn with a completely winning endgame. So that's why after rook takes e1, Suleymanli resigned, and that means that Gukesh is moving forward with 4 out of 4 to world's number 5th place. Absolutely remarkable progress made by this 18-year-old superstar World Championship finalist from India. And well, the tournament is just warming up. There are so many more rounds to be played still, so I'm very curious to see how Gukesh is going to play in the next couple of rounds, and so of course how his team going to do with all these top guys in the team. I'm expecting many more exciting games from them, and very likely when they play exciting chess, I guarantee that it will be covered on the channel as well. So stay tuned for more.